At 6:15 on January 7, 1945, Major Thomas McGuire climbed into the cockpit of his P-38 Lightning at Dulag Airfield on Leyte, watching three other Lightnings warming up on the runway. Rain still clung to the metal skins of the aircraft. Engine exhaust drifted low over the pierced steel planking. McGuire was not authorized to fly this mission. He was 24 years old. He had 38 confirmed aerial victories, 2 short of tying Richard Bong, America's highest-scoring ace. Bong had 40. McGuire had 38. And Lieutenant General George Kinney, commander of the 5th Air Force, had issued a direct order grounding McGuire to make sure it stayed that way. By January 1945, the 5th Air Force faced 2 problems in the Philippines. The first was tactical. Japanese fighters were still operating from concealed jungle airstrips, striking American bombers and transports when opportunities appeared. The second problem was personal. Thomas McGuire was obsessed with beating Dick Bong's record. McGuire had joined the 431st Fighter Squadron, 475th Fighter Group, in July 1943. His first year in combat had been agonizingly slow. Squadron command duties kept him behind a desk. Illness grounded him for weeks at a time. While other pilots accumulated victories, McGuire filled out reports and watched kill tallies climb without his name. Then August 18, 1943 happened, over Wewak, New Guinea. In one afternoon, McGuire shot down 2 Nakajima Ki, 43 Oscars, and 1 Kawasaki Ki, 61 Tony. The next day, he destroyed 2 more Oscars. 5 victories in 48 hours. Ace status overnight, after a year of nothing. From that moment forward, McGuire never slowed down. He mastered the twin-engine P-38 Lightning, an aircraft many pilots found unforgiving and cumbersome. McGuire made it fluid. He could roll it, dive it, and reverse it with precision that bordered on reckless confidence. He wrote a combat tactics manual that was circulated throughout the 5th Air Force. In the summer of 1944, civilian contractor Charles Lindbergh bunked with McGuire and flew as his wingman on unauthorized missions. McGuire treated the most famous aviator alive like a junior pilot. By October 17, 1943, McGuire had 11 confirmed kills. That day over Oro Bay, he dove into 7 Japanese Zeros attacking a lone American P-38. He shot down 3 before the remaining fighters shredded his aircraft. With the controls destroyed, McGuire bailed out at 12,000 feet. His parachute harness snagged inside the cockpit, sending him plummeting 1,000 feet before he freed himself. He hit the ocean 25 miles from shore. His life raft was riddled with shrapnel holes and wouldn't inflate. A Navy PT boat rescued him 30 minutes later. 6 weeks in the hospital followed. Broken ribs, wrist injuries, internal damage that would have ended most flying careers. McGuire returned to combat anyway. Throughout 1944, the race between McGuire and Bong became relentless. Every time McGuire closed the gap, Bong matched him kill for kill. On November 10th, McGuire downed a Ki-43 over Ormoc Bay. A fragment from the exploding aircraft smashed through his canopy and struck his head, knocking him unconscious. He said nothing, afraid he'd be pulled from flight status. On December 7th, McGuire and Bong flew together again. After landing, McGuire realized he had been sitting in blood. A rifle-caliber round had pierced his cockpit and grazed him during a strafing run. He told no one. On Christmas Day 1944, McGuire led 15 P-38s as top cover for bombers attacking Mabalacat Airfield. 20 Japanese fighters intercepted them. McGuire's guns jammed mid-fight. For 30 minutes, he used his Lightning itself as a weapon, diving, climbing, forcing enemy fighters into disadvantageous positions until his wingmen could finish them. 3 confirmed kills. On December 26th, he volunteered to lead escorts over Clark Field and shot down 4 Japanese aircraft in rapid succession. 38 victories. 2 behind Bong. That night, General Kinney made his decision. Bong was being sent home for a publicity tour. America's ace deserved his celebration. McGuire was grounded until Bong returned. McGuire ignored the order. On December 30th, December 31st, and January 2nd, he flew unauthorized combat missions. His entire squadron knew. They looked the other way. If McGuire scored additional victories, the claims would simply be delayed. Kinney never found out. Bong landed in San Francisco on New Year's Eve. The celebration began. McGuire planned one last mission. January 7th. A fighter sweep over Negroes Island. For P-38s, McGuire, Major Jack Rittmeyer, Captain Edwin Weaver, and Lieutenant Douglas Thorpe. Before takeoff, McGuire made a decision every experienced P-38 pilot knew was dangerous. Standard doctrine required jettisoning external fuel tanks before combat. The added drag and weight made the Lightning unstable in tight maneuvers. McGuire had written that himself. But the tanks gave range. Range meant more airstrips. More airstrips meant more targets. McGuire wanted 3 kills, just enough to tie Bong. He ordered the tanks kept on. At 6:30, for P-38s lifted off from Dulag, each carrying 2 150-gallon drop tanks, 1,000 pounds of extra weight hanging beneath their wings. Slower, less agile, more vulnerable. They reached Negroes at 7:20 and descended through Broken Cloud. Below them lay 2 Japanese airfields, Fabrica to the north, Manapla to the south, both believed operational. Fabrica was silent. No aircraft. No movement. McGuire turned south toward Manapla, partially concealed by jungle canopy. At 7:35, Captain Weaver spoke over the radio. Bandit, climbing from below, left side. McGuire rolled his Lightning toward the contact. And the last mission began. The aircraft climbing toward them was a Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar, a Japanese Army Air Force fighter built, for one thing, turning. It was lighter than a P-38, more agile, and lethal at close range. The Oscar pilot should have run. For P-38 Lightnings against a single Oscar meant certain death for the Japanese fighter. He attacked anyway. Lieutenant Douglas Thorpe, flying number 3, saw the Oscar coming straight at him. He broke hard left. The Japanese pilot turned with him instantly, falling in behind Thorpe's Lightning and opening fire. 12 7mm rounds struck Thorpe's left engine. The P-38 shuddered, smoke trailing behind it. Major Jack Rittmeyer dove to assist. Thorpe tightened his turn and managed to force the Oscar off his tail. The Japanese pilot broke away cleanly, scanning for a new target. He found one. Captain Edwin Weaver was directly ahead. The Oscar accelerated, closed the distance, and slid in behind Weaver's Lightning, firing short, controlled bursts. This was not a desperate attack. This was precise flying. The pilot was Warrant Officer Akira Sugimoto, an instructor with over 3,000 hours in the Ki-43, one of the most experienced Japanese fighter pilots still flying in the Philippines. He had survived years of combat in New Guinea and the Dutch East Indies. He understood his aircraft perfectly, and he immediately recognized something else. The P-38s were carrying external drop tanks. The extra weight made them slower, less responsive, vulnerable in a turning fight. Sugimoto stayed disciplined, remaining behind Weaver, forcing him tighter and tighter into his turn. Weaver radioed that he was under attack and cut sharply inside to spoil the shot. It worked, but only briefly. Major Thomas McGuire eased his own turn, deliberately exposing himself. Sugimoto took the bait. The Oscar switched targets and slid in behind McGuire. The 2 aircraft dropped to 300 feet above the jungle canopy, spiraling into a turning fight where mistakes were fatal. It was the exact situation McGuire had warned against in his own tactics manual. Never engage at low altitude with drop tanks attached. McGuire knew it. He did it anyway. He pulled harder on the control yoke, trying to bring the Lightning's nose around. Sugimoto stayed glued behind him. McGuire's airspeed bled away. 180 knots. 160, 140. The twin Allison engines screamed at full power. The airframe began to shudder. McGuire needed just a few more degrees. Just enough to get the Oscar into his gun sight. Above them, another Japanese fighter appeared. A second Oscar. This one was flown by Technical Sergeant Masanori Fukuda, a former instructor newly assigned to the 71st Sentai. He dove straight at Major Rittmeyer's P-38 in a head-on attack. The burst was devastating. Rounds tore through Rittmeyer's center nacelle and cockpit. The Lightning disintegrated in midair and pitched down into a river below. Rittmeyer was killed instantly. McGuire never saw it. His entire world had narrowed to the Oscar behind him. He pulled harder. At 300 feet, with full drop tanks attached, the P-38 stalled. McGuire felt it immediately. The control yoke went soft in his hands. The nose dropped. The aircraft snap-rolled inverted. Both engines were still at full throttle, but the wings were no longer flying. The jungle surged upward. He had 2 seconds, maybe 3. McGuire tried to recover, pushing forward, rolling the aircraft upright. For a brief instant, it looked possible. The wings began to level. The nose started to rise. Then the ground arrived. At 7:41 on January 7, 1945, Thomas McGuire's P-38 struck the jungle canopy and exploded. The impact killed him instantly. Black smoke and fire rose above the trees. Filipino civilians in a nearby village saw the crash. They reached the wreckage before Japanese troops recovered McGuire's body and concealed it. Above them, the fight lasted another 30 seconds. Captain Weaver saw Fukuda's attack on Rittmeyer and fired back, crippling the Oscar. Fukuda managed a wheels-up landing at Manapla airstrip, destroying his aircraft but surviving. Sugimoto's Oscar had also taken damage from combined American fire earlier in the fight. He limped back toward Manapla, crash-landing short of the field. Filipino guerrillas found him later that day and killed him. Lieutenant Thorpe, his P-38 trailing smoke from one engine, joined Weaver and turned for home. In less than 2 minutes, 2 American pilots were dead. Within hours, word reached 5th Air Force headquarters. Major Thomas McGuire was missing in action, presumed killed. General George Kinney received the report while preparing for a meeting in Manila. For a moment, the war disappeared. He thought only of the pilot he had grounded 3 weeks earlier. The pilot who ignored the order. The pilot who had been 2 victories from the record. Back in the United States, Richard Bong was still on his publicity tour, parades, interviews, war bond rallies. America's ace of aces with 40 confirmed victories. The news reached Bong on January 8th. The rivalry was over. Bong would remain the top ace. But he had lost something more important. A fellow Lightning pilot who understood what it meant to fight at the edge of control, over jungle and ocean, against an enemy who never quit. McGuire's body remained in the Philippines until 1949. It was finally recovered and returned home. On May 17, 1950, Thomas Buchanan McGuire Jr. was laid to rest. 2 victories short. 1 mistake too low. 1 turn too far. Thomas McGuire was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. He was posthumously promoted to lieutenant colonel. In 1948, McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey was named in his honor. On March 7, 1946, the Medal of Honor citation was published. It described his actions on December 25 and 26, 1944, 7 confirmed kills in 2 days. It detailed missions where his guns jammed, and he continued fighting anyway. It praised the risks he took to protect bombers and rescue wingmen. The citation said nothing about January 7th. It made no mention of the unauthorized fighter sweep. No mention of the order he ignored. No mention of the decision to keep external fuel tanks attached. No mention of the low-altitude turning fight that violated every principle he himself had written. But every P-38 pilot in the 5th Air Force knew what had happened. They knew McGuire had broken his own rules. They knew he had been grounded and flew anyway. They knew he was chasing Dick Bong's record. And they knew that obsession killed him. The question that lingered wasn't what happened. It was why. Why would one of the most technically gifted fighter pilots in the Army Air Forces make such a fundamental mistake? Why would the man who wrote the tactics manual ignore his own doctrine? Why would someone with 38 confirmed victories throw everything away for 2 more? The answer lay long before the Philippines. Thomas Buchanan McGuire Jr. was born on August 1, 1920, in Ridgewood, New Jersey. His parents divorced when he was young. He moved south with his mother to Sebring, Florida, a small town with limited opportunity and even less patience for a boy with sharp edges. McGuire didn't fit in. He was defensive, prickly. He developed an air of superiority to shield insecurities formed through years of bullying. Aviation became his escape, something measurable, technical, unforgiving, where performance mattered more than popularity. In 1938, he enrolled at the Georgia Institute of Technology, studying aeronautical engineering. He played in the marching band, served as a sergeant major in ROTC, joined Beta Theta Pi, and lived a life of discipline and ambition. After 3 years, he left school to join the Army Air Forces in 1941. He reported to flight training in Corsicana, Texas, continued in San Antonio, and earned his pilot wings at Kelly Field. On February 2, 1942, at 21 years old, he was commissioned as second lieutenant. No combat experience. No kills. Just expectations. His first assignments, Selfridge Field, then Payne Field, were stateside. In June 1942, he finally received combat orders to the Aleutian Islands, flying the Bell P-39 Airacobra. The Aleutians were misery. Fog, rain, wind, cold, endless patrols over empty ocean. Japanese forces occupied Attu and Kiska, but contact was rare. McGuire flew combat patrols for 4 months. 0 victories. 0 engagements. The Airacobra was the wrong aircraft for the mission, short range, poor high-altitude performance, but it was all they had. By October 1942, McGuire left the Aleutians with nothing to show for his time except frustration. In December 1942, he married Marilyn "Pudgy" Gisler. Shortly after, he transferred to Hamilton Field, California, then to Orange County Airport in February 1943 for transition training. There, he met the aircraft that would define him, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Twin engines, long range, heavy armament, exceptional high-altitude performance, complex, demanding, unforgiving. Many pilots struggled with it. McGuire did not. He mastered every system. He studied its limits. He learned how to make the big twin-engine fighter behave like a lightweight pursuit plane. Complexity didn't intimidate him. It rewarded him. In March 1943, he shipped to the Southwest Pacific, assigned to the 49th Fighter Group in New Guinea. Richard Bong was already there, already scoring victories, already becoming a legend. McGuire flew his first combat mission on April 22. 2 months later, he transferred again to a new unit personally created by Lieutenant General George Kenney, the 475th Fighter Group, all P-38s, known as Satan's Angels. McGuire joined the 431st Fighter Squadron, and for the next year, frustration defined him. Administrative duties kept him grounded. As operations officer, then squadron commander, he spent more time behind a desk than behind a gun sight. When he did fly, Japanese fighters were scarce. New Guinea was winding down. The enemy was retreating. Meanwhile, other pilots were piling up victories. Tommy Lynch, Neil Kirby, and especially Dick Bong. By mid-1943, Bong had 16 confirmed kills. McGuire had none. The disparity gnawed at him. He had flown combat missions for over a year with nothing to show for it. No recognition. No progress. No reputation. Conversations in the squadron revolved around other names. Never his. McGuire changed. He became obsessive about preparation. He personally bore-sighted the guns on every aircraft in his squadron, a job usually left to ground crews. He didn't trust anyone else to do it correctly. He memorized Japanese aircraft silhouettes, studied enemy tactics, learned every strength and weakness. Then came August 18, 1943, a mission to Wewak, New Guinea. Japanese fighters intercepted Key 43 Oscars and Key 61 Tonys. McGuire dove into the fight. 2 Oscars destroyed. 1 Tony destroyed. 3 kills in 1 mission. The next day, 2 more Oscars. 5 victories in 2 days. Ace status after 13 months of nothing. McGuire had arrived. But 5 kills weren't enough. They never would be. Lynch had more. Kirby had more. And Bong kept pulling further ahead. By September 1943, Bong had 20 victories. McGuire had 5. The race had begun, and McGuire would do anything to win it. McGuire's kill count crept upward through late 1943. September, October. Missions over New Guinea and New Britain. But Japanese fighters were becoming harder to find. The enemy was conserving aircraft, pulling back to defend positions that actually mattered. Many missions ended without contact. Then October 17, 1943 changed everything. McGuire was flying patrol over Oro Bay when radar picked up incoming Japanese bombers. Mitsubishi G-4M Bettys, escorted by A-6 M0s. His flight scrambled from Dobadura, climbing to 23,000 feet. He spotted the formation below, and something worse. A lone P-38 was trailing smoke. 7 Zeros were on it. That pilot was dead unless someone intervened. McGuire didn't hesitate. He jettisoned his external tanks and dove straight into the formation. 3 Zeros fell in rapid succession. The attacked P-38 escaped, but the remaining 4 Zeros turned on McGuire. They swarmed him, Cannon fire shredded his left engine. Machine gun rounds tore into the right. A 20mm shell exploded in the radio compartment. A 7.7mm round struck his wrist and passed into the instrument panel. Shrapnel ripped into his arm and hips. McGuire tried to pull out. The elevator controls were gone. He released the escape hatch and tried to bail out, but his parachute harness snagged inside the cockpit. The P-38 fell. 12,000 feet. 10,000. 8,000. He fought the harness as the aircraft plunged. 6,000, 4,000, 2,000. At roughly 1,000 feet, he broke free. The parachute deployed. He hit the water 25 miles offshore. His life raft was riddled with shrapnel holes and wouldn't inflate. McGuire floated for 30 minutes before Navy PT 152 pulled him from the ocean and carried him to PT Tender Hilo in Buena Bay. 6 weeks in the hospital. Broken ribs. Wrist wound. Puncture injuries. For most pilots, that would have ended the war. McGuire refused. He returned to the squadron in December with 11 confirmed victories. Still far behind Bong. Early 1944 brought more of the same frustration. McGuire resumed combat operations, but administrative duties followed him everywhere. As commander of the 431st Fighter Squadron from April through December, he spent endless hours on paperwork, training schedules, and planning. Meanwhile, Bong flew as a freelance ace, attached directly to V Fighter Command. No desk, no administration, just flying and killing. On April 12, 1944, Bong shot down his 26th and 27th victories over Hollandia, surpassing Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record. America crowned a new hero. Newspapers followed. Kenny promoted him to major. McGuire had 16 kills, 10 behind. The gap felt permanent. That summer, an unusual figure arrived at the 475th Fighter Group, Charles Lindbergh. By 1944, Lindbergh was a civilian contractor studying fuel efficiency for United Aircraft. He bunked with McGuire for weeks. Flew as his wingman on unauthorized combat missions. It was illegal. Civilians were not allowed to fight. Lindbergh did it anyway. McGuire treated the most famous aviator alive like an assistant, ordering him around, sending him for errands. Other pilots laughed. Lindbergh quietly complied. But McGuire learned from him. Fuel conservation, throttle discipline, range extension. He applied the techniques relentlessly, stretching the P-38's endurance, staying over target longer, increasing opportunities for combat. By October 1944, McGuire had 24 victories. Bong had 38. Then came the Philippines. Both men flew from Tacloban Airfield on Leyte. Japanese air opposition was fierce. Targets were everywhere. The race accelerated. On November 2nd, McGuire escorted bombers to Ormoc Bay, shot down a Key 43 Oscar. During a strafing run, rifle-caliber ground fire punctured his cockpit. A bullet grazed his buttocks. He discovered the wound after landing. Blood soaked his seat. He told no one. 25 kills. On November 10th, another mission over Ormoc. McGuire destroyed another Oscar. A chunk of the exploding aircraft smashed through his canopy, struck his head, and knocked him unconscious. He woke seconds later. Blood covered his face. He flew the aircraft home. Said nothing. 26 kills. On December 17, 1944, Dick Bong scored his 40th victory. The race was over. America's ace of aces. General Douglas MacArthur personally awarded Bong the Medal of Honor. McGuire had 31. On December 18th, General George Kinney made his decision. Bong was going home. Publicity tours. War bonds. Parades. The nation needed its hero. McGuire watched the gap. 9 kills, finally freeze in place. Or so it seemed. Bong would be gone for weeks. Japanese fighters were still everywhere. McGuire saw an opening. On December 25, 1944, Christmas Day, McGuire volunteered to lead 15 P-38s as top cover for bombers striking Mabalacat Airfield on Luzon. Heavy resistance expected. At 0900 hours, 20 Japanese fighters attacked, Zeros and Oscars, diving out of the sun. McGuire went straight into them. And this time, the numbers would finally start to move. McGuire's P-38s turned to meet them. The fight lasted 30 minutes. McGuire destroyed 3 Zeros. Then his guns died. All 4. 50 caliber machine guns jammed. The 20mm cannon jammed. Everything went silent. No way to shoot. For most pilots, that was the signal to disengage, break contact, head for home, live to fight another day. McGuire stayed. For another 30 minutes, he fought without weapons. He used the P-38 itself as a weapon, diving aggressively, feinting attacks, charging enemy fighters head-on, forcing them to break away from the bombers. He chased Zeros through vertical maneuvers he had no right to survive, drawing them away from the formation. At one point, he forced a Zero directly into his wingman's guns. The wingman fired. The Zero exploded. McGuire received credit for the assist. 3 confirmed kills on Christmas Day. 34 total. Still 6 behind Bong. The next morning, December 26th, McGuire volunteered again. This time, escort fighters to Clark Field. Another heavily defended target. Another mission most pilots would have avoided. The formation launched at 0800 hours. Japanese fighters intercepted almost immediately. McGuire flew straight into the chaos. He repeatedly broke formation to rescue embattled wingmen. He drove off attacks while under fire himself, sometimes outnumbered 3-1, sometimes worse. He exposed his own aircraft to save a crippled bomber. He parried attacks from 4 enemy fighters, shot 1 down, then engaged 3 more alone, destroyed 1, then another. By the end of the engagement, for confirmed kills, December 26th ended with McGuire at 38 victories, 2 behind Bong. He returned to Tacloban late that afternoon. 2 days, 7 confirmed kills, the most aggressive flying of his entire career. He had closed the gap from 9 kills to 2 in 48 hours. The entire 5th Air Force was talking about it. McGuire was on fire. Dick Bong was already halfway across the Pacific. San Francisco waited. Parades, war bond rallies, newspaper headlines. General George Kenney received updates on both men, Bong's publicity tour, McGuire's Christmas rampage. This was exactly what Kenney had feared. If McGuire kept flying at this pace, he would break Bong's record before Bong even reached California. America's Ace of Aces would lose the title before receiving his welcome home celebration. The narrative would collapse. Kenney acted. On December 27th, Kenney grounded McGuire. Direct order. No more combat missions until Bong's celebration concluded. McGuire was to remain at Tacloban. Administrative duties only. Train replacement pilots. Stay out of the cockpit. Stay away from combat. The order was clear. Unambiguous. McGuire acknowledged it. He said he understood. He lied. On December 30th, McGuire flew an unauthorized fighter sweep. His squadron knew he'd been grounded. They looked the other way. No contact. No kills. On December 31st, New Year's Eve, he flew again. 4-ship flight over Mindoro. No contact. No kills. On January 2nd, a third unauthorized mission, this time over Leyte Gulf. Limited enemy activity. No opportunities. No victories. 3 combat missions in 4 days. All unauthorized. All in direct violation of Kenney's order. None produced kills, but they proved something else. McGuire was willing to disobey. Kenney never found out. No one reported it. The 431st Fighter Squadron kept the secret. Officially, McGuire remained grounded. Officially, he was waiting for Bong's celebration to end. Unofficially, he was planning one more mission. January 7th, 1945. For P-38s. A fighter sweep over Negroes Island. And this time, McGuire made a decision that violated everything he himself had written. He ordered his flight to keep their external fuel tanks attached. His own tactics manual was explicit. Drop external tanks before engaging enemy fighters. The reasons were drilled into every P-38 pilot. The tanks added 1,000 pounds of dead weight. They degraded turn rate, reduced climb performance, increased stall speed, extended dive recovery time. Standard procedure was simple. Enemy fighters appear. 2 switches. 1 pull. 3 seconds. 3 seconds that could save your life. McGuire knew this better than anyone. He had written the manual. He had trained the pilots. He had survived 2 years of combat by following those rules. On October 17, 1943, over Oro Bay, he had dropped his tanks before diving into 7 Zeros and lived. But on January 7, 1945, he gave a different order. Save your tanks. The reasoning made sense, on paper. Negroes Island was far from base. 2 airstrips to search. Drop the tanks too early and the mission ends. No second target. No kills. But the moment enemy fighters appeared, doctrine demanded immediate jettison. Everyone knew it. McGuire knew it. Weaver knew it. Throp knew it. Rittmeyer knew it. Every P-38 pilot in the theater knew it. When Warrant Officer Akira Sugimoto's Ki-43 attacked, McGuire should have dropped the tanks instantly. 3 seconds. 2 switches. 1 pull. Instead, he kept them. And then he tried to outturn an instructor pilot with 3,000 hours in the Ki-43 at 300 feet, in a P-38 carrying 1,000 pounds of extra weight. The physics were unforgiving. The P-38 Lightning stalled. It snap-rolled, inverted, and fell. There was no recovery. Later analysis by 5th Air Force pilots was unanimous. The decision to keep the external fuel tanks attached was the primary cause of death. Without the tanks, the P-38 could recover from a stall, even at low altitude. With them, it became uncontrollable in a slow-speed turning fight. At 300 feet, there was no margin. The Lightning hit the jungle and disintegrated. The question that haunted every P-38 pilot afterward was simple. Why didn't he drop the tanks? He had time. Sugimoto did not appear suddenly. The engagement developed over 30 to 40 seconds. Enough time to reach down, flip 2 switches, pull the release, and shed the weight that was killing him. 3 seconds. That was all it would have taken. Several explanations emerged. The first was fixation. McGuire's entire focus was on the kill, on getting Sugimoto into his gun sight, on scoring his 39th victory, on closing the gap with Richard Bong. Everything else became secondary. Airspeed, altitude, survival. The second was task saturation. A low-altitude turning fight in AP-38 required absolute concentration, throttle management, rudder coordination, aileron control, constant airspeed monitoring, anticipating the enemy's next move. Adding one more task, jettisoning the tanks, may have been one task too many. The third was confidence. McGuire was one of the finest P-38 pilots in the Air Forces. He had survived dozens of engagements through superior flying. He had made the Lightning do things other pilots thought impossible. Perhaps he believed he could outfly the physics. He could not. By early 1945, the rivalry had consumed him. Every mission was an opportunity. Every engagement was a chance to catch Bong. The obsession drove him to fly with head wounds, with bullet grazes, with broken ribs. It drove him to violate General Kinney's grounding order. It drove him to ignore his own tactical doctrine. On January 7, 1945, it drove him to keep external fuel tanks attached while entering a low-altitude turning fight, forcing the P-38 past its stall speed, crashing at 300 feet, chasing his 39th kill. Thomas McGuire died doing exactly what he had warned others never to do. The irony was complete. His death sent shockwaves through the 5th Air Force. Not because he died in combat. Pilots died every day. But because of how he died. One of the most skilled P-38 pilots in the theater, killed by a fundamental violation of basic fighter doctrine. The lesson was impossible to ignore. Within 48 hours, General Kinney issued new standing orders. All P-38 pilots would jettison external fuel tanks immediately upon encountering enemy aircraft. No discretion. No exceptions. Training programs incorporated McGuire's final mission as a case study. New pilots learned about January 7th, about the unauthorized sweep, about the tanks, about the low-altitude turn, about the stall. The message was clear. Even the best pilots die when they ignore fundamentals. McGuire's tactics manual remained in use for the rest of the war. It saved lives. But everyone who read it understood the cruel irony. The man who wrote it died violating his own rules. The rivalry ended that day. Richard Bong remained America's ace of aces. 40 victories. Medal of Honor. But the victory felt hollow. Bong never returned to combat. He married Marjorie Vitendel on February 10, 1945. He became a test pilot at Lockheed, flying the new P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet. On August 6, 1945, the same day the atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima, Richard Bong died in a P-80 crash after engine failure on takeoff. He was 24 years old, 7 months after McGuire. America's two greatest aces, dead before their 25th birthdays. McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey was named in his honor in 1948. See 17 Globemasters and KC, 10 extenders still carry his name on their tail fins. AP-38 stands at the base entrance. His Medal of Honor rests in the base museum. A memorial marks the crash site on Negros Island, maintained by local Filipinos who remember the American pilot who fell from the sky and was protected by their ancestors. The lesson of January 7, 1945, remains timeless. Obsession clouds judgment. Rivalry drives bad decisions. Ignoring fundamentals kills even the most skilled operators. Thomas McGuire was a brilliant pilot, a tactical innovator, a leader. He died because he forgot the basics in pursuit of one more kill. 38 victories. 2 behind Bong. 2 fuel tanks away from survival. 300 feet from recovery. 1 decision from living.